Hello, I am back from the library because some more of the books that I requested from the Women's Prize came through, so I went to pick them up today. So, I have these three. The Bandit Queens, which was the one I was most excited to read, so it's the first one I'm going to start reading. Homesick, which, I need to put the light on. Okay. Homesick, which I think in my video talking about the books I said that this was like a translated novel. No, it's a, I believe originally it was written like I don't think it is translated. I could be wrong. Yeah, it says untranslated on the top. But the author, I think, originally wrote it as like an autobiography, and that's what it was originally published as. But this is kind of story, like the story format of it. I don't know. I can look it up a little bit closer and when I begin to read it, but I misspoke in that video. And then we have I'm a Fan, which if you remember in that video, I was like, I'm not really going to read it. But like I said in my last reading vlog, someone spoke about this and I was like, that actually sounds quite cool. And it's not very long either. It is 200 pages long, so I'm going to give it a shot. I got some other bits from the library too, but I will include that in my April vlog, which I will link up here, but it won't be out by the time this goes up. The shortlist for the Women's Prize for Fiction is announced next week, Thursday, I believe, and I am recording this on Wednesday, the 19th of April, so don't think I'll be able to read all three in that week, in that time. I could if I really put my mind to it, but there are just other activities going on in my life and I don't want to pressure myself ever to read, so we'll see how that goes. But definitely there's no way that I could read them all and film the vlog and edit it and have it up before then anyway, so we'll see. What I might do though is at the end of the vlog include me watching the shortlist so I can see like which books I've read that I thought were good that are on there and which ones aren't, because I think Children of Paradise, which was one of the first ones I requested, and Demon Copperhead still have not come through yet, so I don't know. Hello guys, I have this in my hand and I am on page 130 of it, and it's not what I thought it was going to be, but like I've been able to change my expectations based on the book. So I thought this would be about, you know, this woman that, you know, supposedly killed her husband and now helps this other woman to kill her husband, and it would be kind of like a comedy, a bit like My Sister the Serial Killer, which this is likened to, that and another book. But this has a bit more of a backstory to it, and definitely tries to tackle the issue with domestic violence in marriages, and you know, the whole thing with like, oh, it's such a blessing to have children, and sort of dealing with widowhood and also dealing with being childless, and that's childless not by choice, and just all those expectations that come with, well, the culture that this woman is in. This book is based in India and I believe that it is set in a village as well, and we are following our main character, who is Geeta, and like it says, like with the sort of blurb of the book, she does help another woman to get rid of her husband, because the myth is that she got rid of her husband, which as we're reading the book we're finding out that perhaps actually she didn't. Like her husband might have just disappeared of his own volition, and it's just stuck that somehow she got rid of him, which makes people fear her, so it's made her a bit of an outcast, but at the same time it kind of suits her. So at the same time of sort of dealing with that plot, it's very much serious about in terms of how we're actually going to kill him, why are we killing him, and then talking about all the issues in the neighbourhood as well. And there is a story in here about this woman called the Bandit Queen, who was someone who was severely raped and beaten by loads of men in her life, and this woman Geeta sort of takes inspiration from her, not in the sense that she wants to go on some sort of rampage, but in the sense that when she wants to draw on strength, she thinks about what this woman had to have gone through. So there is a lot in here, there is a lot of like undertones here of that violence against women and what women have to go through. And that's why it is a lot more like darker and a bit more serious than something like My Sister the Serial Killer. And when I think of the themes of the Women's Prize for Fiction list, originally when I saw this I was like, oh, this, you know, seems like a light read, stands out against those. Actually it kind of seems to fit in just right with all the sort of themes that they've chosen in terms of violence against women, and this book is just definitely taking that, because in the case of the woman who wants to kill her husband is a drunk, he takes money from her, which means she can't repay her loans, which means that, like, you know, like she incurs more interest and she has shame on her and all these sorts of things basically, and he beats the children. Like, he's no good for anyone. So it really is about that sort of undercurrent of violence. But yeah, it's not as light as I thought it was going to be, but based on sort of a couple of chapters, I've adjusted my expectations of the book, like in a good way, to know that this is a bit more serious and not light-hearted. But that's where we're at. Hi everyone, I haven't checked in a while and I'm keen to do this check-in because, oh, that just creates a very weird glow, but maybe it's okay. I'm keen to do this check-in because I need to return these 2 books to the library. But this is 2 of the 3 books that I have from the Women's Prize for Fiction longlist. At this point, the shortlist has now been announced. Oh, what just happened there? The shortlist has been announced. I thought it was going to happen on the Thursday, I believe, and then it ended up happening on the Wednesday, and I just, by accident, was on the train and opened up my Instagram and saw, like, the shortlist. And I don't think any of the books that I've read made it onto the shortlist, if I recall correctly, so I'm kind of a bit like not into the prize anymore, because the rest of the books on there, I think the only one that I had to reserve and was going to read was Demon Copperhead, and I think that might be available for me at the library now. I didn't realise it was so huge though, so now I'm in 2 minds of reading it. But let me talk to you about this book, because this was such a shame for me. If you remember when I spoke about of all the books I was excited to read, it was this one, and I ended up giving this 1 star, and I said in the beginning that, you know, it wasn't what I expected, but I adjusted my expectations, and I completely did. What made me give this a 1 star was I just didn't think most of it was plausible. So if you want to read this book, I probably would avoid listening to the rest of what I'm going to say, because in order for me to talk about why I didn't like the book, I need to spoil it. So this book talks about Geeta, and it's rumoured that she murdered her husband. So when another woman comes to her to say, you know, like, for all these reasons above, like, I want to murder my husband, she is like, no, whatever. And this woman keeps asking, and eventually she like gives in and helps this woman. The issue with this is the woman keeps saying, you know, because you killed your husband, And once Geeta helps this woman to kill her husband, this woman then starts to blackmail Geeta and be like really awful to Geeta, and actually tries to, like, jokingly, I suppose, but also really real, poison Geeta in the same way that she did to her husband. And, you know, all fun and games and whatever. But the thing is, Geeta didn't murder her husband. And so it's really dumb to me. Why would you, someone who didn't actually murder their husband, you know you didn't murder your husband, right? Everyone else thinks you did, whatever, fine. Like she says for herself, it's not a bad rumour to have because people leave her alone. But if you know you didn't do that, why are you willing to commit murder on someone else? I'm not saying, you know, the things that the woman listed and what she was going through weren't terrible. But if you know you didn't kill your own husband for the things he was doing to you, I don't believe that this same person would have that same mindset to plan a murder for another person. But also, if then this woman started blackmailing me, I'd be like, well, I didn't actually kill my husband. And she uses that as an excuse, as, you know, if this woman finds out, this woman's name is Fatima, finds out that she didn't actually murder her husband, then she'll have like more leverage over her, or she won't see her as scary or dominating because, you know, she's not a husband killer. And I can see that, but at the same time I'm just a bit like, there is no, for me, I don't think, what could you have over me? Like, at the end of the day, I gave you the idea to kill your husband, but you killed your husband. I know my husband is still alive because I didn't kill him. So they also kept saying, oh, who are they going to believe, like me or you? And it's like, okay, she has no proof that her husband is alive, but she also, no one has any proof that he's dead. So it's just like, well, maybe they'll believe me because my husband, for one, I know I didn't kill him, but 2, you killed your husband. So I'm just a bit like, none of that was plausible for me. It was just, that whole plot point was so irritating. And then other things happen in the book. And then towards the end, annoyingly, her husband comes back. Her husband comes back and says he's blind. And in the end, you find out he's not blind. And I'm just like, again, if someone is faking being blind, I feel like at some point you would realise. Because they realise at the end through some of the things that he says. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, how did you not realise this before? Would you not just be like, well, how do you know that? Like, if you can't see. Like, I'm not trying to be any sort of way horrible. I just, it doesn't make any sense to me that the reasons why they realised he wasn't blind at the end were things that didn't crop up before. And I was just like, not, to me, not plausible. Like, I think she hands him something, or he's handing someone something, and it's only later that she realises that part of that couldn't be possible. Or how did he know to do that if he was blind? And I'm just like, how did you not see this man was scamming you? But anyway, so a lot happens in this book that I haven't described. But what, for me, those 2 elements are kind of what made me think, I don't really like this. But towards the end, they really talk about the fact of women's place in society. And it just happens at the end where, you know, there's this sort of annoying like kidnap scene where Geeta's there, her husband's there, this other guy that she's angered is there, her friend Saloni comes along, the woman Fatima comes along, and then this other woman comes along. So there's loads of them just in this room, and this one person has a gun, and it just is a ridiculous scene. It really is just so silly. But in the end, they're just talking about, you know, women's place in society and what women are expected to just accept and all of these things. And it's just like, okay, this is nothing new. And I hate saying things like that because things in books don't always have to present you with a new way of thinking. But for me, the reason why I was just a bit like, okay, but it's just like, this was the undercurrent of the whole book. Like throughout the book, they're having these little snippets of conversation, so we already know this. So to come to the end and for that to sort of be the realization was just kind of annoying to me, because I was like, but we already know this. Like we already know this. So I don't know. It just got very frustrating and unbelievable in the end. That final scene for me was just like, what? All these people just traipsing in, and then someone being like, oh, well, another person to add to the list of like women I have to kill. And it was just like a very dramatic scene. And I do understand that, you know, Bollywood is very dramatic, so maybe she's pulling some references from there, but I can't just assume that just because this book is set in India, like, do you know what I mean? So it just all felt really dramatic, and I was reading it and I was just like, this is just really silly. So it had a lot of promise for me, but in the end, I think the execution of just some of the plot points, I was like, this isn't in any way, shape or form believable to me. And there is this little sort of legend of the bandit queen, of this woman who was like violently gang raped. It's based on like the sort of ousting of her because of the case system and things like that. So there is sort of a myth and legend running through it, but again, very loosely done, I would say, and not very well done. So yeah, not surprised that this didn't make it to the shortlist, if I'm honest. The other book is this one, and I'm reading. This is I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel, and if you can also remember, this is one that I said that I probably wouldn't read, but like I said, blah, 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 I heard someone talking about it, reading it. I'm actually really enjoying this. This is so like dark, sarcastic. I want to really compare it to, I've just forgotten the novel by Ottessa Moshfegh, and books in that sort of vein, but this feels a lot more clever and this feels a lot more witty. And I don't know if it's because it's set in the UK and from a UK perspective, not a UK perspective, but I don't know, just because it's a character in the UK. It just feels a little bit more elevated than those titles. Like, whilst they all feel very self-indulgent, and this character is very self-indulgent and very self-aware and self-indulgent and just reckless, I don't know, I guess because this woman is kind of also like middle-aged. I believe she is Asian of some sort. It's described that she is definitely a woman of colour, and it's just this dark obsession with this man that she's having an affair with, because she has a boyfriend and he has a wife and he's also sleeping with someone else, and so she's obsessed with him but also the other woman that he's sleeping with, and this woman happens to be some sort of Instagram star. So it's about her obsession about that woman, him, just her sort of brooding over the fact that she really just dislikes everything about her life, how violent she is to her boyfriend, how horrible she is to her boyfriend. And it's not what I expected, but she has some very funny observations, and that's the thing with these books. They have these little observations that I think a lot of us can relate to, where we're just like, oh. So yeah, and there's a lot of critique in there of like Instagram culture and just things like that, but that's not as important to me. So I'm actually really enjoying this. So this book is actually due back to the library today, but I'm going to, both of them are due back to the library today. So I'm going to finish this book tonight and then hand it back a day late. And then I will be reading Homesick. And then I think that's just going to end the blog, because I don't plan on reading the rest of the books that are on the shortlist. I don't find them to my taste. So yeah, we'll see. So it's looking like the only book, not the only book, sorry, Memphis I loved, but the other book that I'm going to love is this. But I've not started Homesick yet, so we'll see. Hello everyone, I am finally here to wrap up this second reading vlog and just get it up and posted, because I believe the Women's Prize for Fiction gets announced, the shortlist anyway, gets announced in June, and today is the 27th of May. And I know I'm not going to be reading the other books that's on the shortlist, and I'm just going to stop the project here. So I thought I'd wrap it up, because I actually started editing the vlog yesterday and just realised I hadn't filmed any clips, updated you on anything. So last we spoke, I was reading I'm a Fan. So I started on the 28th of April and finished out on the 3rd of May. I ended up giving that 3.5 stars. So when I updated you, it probably would have been the 29th of April, I want to say. And I really enjoyed this book, especially for one that I thought I wasn't going to read. So I'm so glad I heard like some of my colleagues talking about it. And the book very much, like I said, reminds me of the Ottessa Moshfegh book, which again has just gone completely out of my head. but I've done a whole video reviewing that book, so I will link it up here. Very much it falls into that Goodreads book list where it's like women against the void, because that's kind of what this book is about. And it is about our main unnamed character. I mean, I gave you the blurb in the other clip. It very much continues to be about her and her sort of obsession with this man that doesn't want her, who has a wife actually, and is also seeing this Instagram woman that she has become obsessed with. So the book is just so multi-layered in terms of what it's focusing on. It's focusing on like her sort of aggression and dissatisfaction in her relationship, but then her longing want for someone who doesn't want her, but then that sort of obsession with Instagram as well, and just peering over someone's life, poring over someone's life and trying to piece together like who they are, and just, you know, all the kind of remarks that you might think about people. And then it's also dealing with the fact that our narrator is a person of colour, and I believe the man she's actually seeing is white, and also the woman that she's obsessing with. So then it's a talk of like the sort of privilege of the Instagram woman, because she gets a lot of like likes and fame for the things that she does in terms of the art she chooses, how she furnishes her house, but all of that is on the back of her dad starting some sort of community group or something that made him very rich, and all that sort of privilege that entitles her to. So there's just so many layers to this book, and I do think it's fantastic. It gets a bit weary sometimes, and I do think that's the point. We're supposed to get annoyed at her obsession with these people, with this man that doesn't want her, with how ungrateful she is being to her partner and her boyfriend. So yeah, I really ended up enjoying it, and like I said, I ended up giving that 3.5 stars, which I do believe, no, it's not the highest one I've rated. The highest one I've rated is Memphis. So let's talk about Homesick, because that was the other one that I requested from the library. I actually requested something about the children, the one about the people in the cinema, but I cancelled that after I realised it wasn't on the shortlist and I didn't want to read it that much anyway. So I read Homesick, and I gave this 3 stars. Again, this was one that I actually ended up finding really pleasant. I started reading that on the 12th of May and I finished it on the 21st of May. In the other clip, I spoke about whether this book was fiction or non-fiction, because I believe this was published originally as a fictionalized version, but this version is actually a memoir. So this is Amy's account, I believe, and the reason I'm saying that is because I just kept reading the book and getting confused about who was the elder sister and who was the younger sister and who was the sister telling the story. But I believe it is Amy who is telling the story, and it's about herself and her sister Zoe and how they grew up in Oklahoma. I really feel like I should be able to say that, because the word Oklahoma, oh my god, comes up in Only Murders in the Building so many times, because the podcast is called like All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma, but I cannot say it for the life of me. But anyway, Zoe suffers with some sort of condition. I think we only find out towards the end what it might be, but initially they don't know what it is, and she's having seizures, she's really ill, she's having to go to hospital a lot, having MRIs, And obviously Zoe as her oldest sister, Amy as her oldest sister is one, trying to keep a childhood for her sister and care for her sister, but at the same time like also navigate her life and navigate like childhood and sisterhood and those sorts of things. So it essentially is just a memoir of their time from when they were about like 7 until I believe Amy goes to like college, and just a bit further, so maybe when she's about 20 or something like that. But the main bulk takes place when they are kids, up and from 7 till like when she's 15. And honestly, as memoirs go, it was a pretty like decent memoir. It's not one I would have picked up like just randomly, because it wouldn't have caught my eye in that sense. But it is about, you know, both kids are homeschooled, and it is about the fact that Amy is actually quite clever for her age, so she ends up going to college, and when she goes to college, obviously the kids are a bit older, so it's about who takes her under their wing, and also how she navigates that, and just how she navigates life in general, navigates life with the sick sister, but also just navigates life with the fact that their family is very like siloed. It is just them and like, I think 2 grandparents and stuff like that. So not a lot goes on in this book, but yeah, obviously a lot goes on because of the sick sister and the feelings that Amy herself had. So it says on the back of the book that the life is sort of rocked by a tragic death, and there is a teacher, a very young boy, who was teaching them Russian and Ukrainian, I believe, and yeah, their lives are kind of altered by that. I don't feel like it was a pivotal moment in the book. Well, yes, it was a pivotal moment in the book, but I don't think it really changed the course of the book, as in when I was reading it. Obviously, for a moment in the author's life, it definitely was huge and significant, but I didn't feel too much of a change in tone or a change in pace or shift of the book at all. It still very much continued to be about her days. So yeah, it was a nice read, a pleasant read, so that's why I gave it 3 stars. So I do have Demon Copperhead there. But I'm actually going to return that. I don't think I'm going to start that, which is a shame because it did sound like it could be a really engaging read. I just think there are other titles that I want to read, and that book is large, and I don't want to really prioritize that over any of the other books that I want to read. So this is the end of this vlog. So I will put across the screen the books that I did end up reading for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and you'll see my ratings for them. But obviously Memphis I gave 4 out of 5 stars, and then Bandit Queen I gave 1 star. And yeah, so thank you very much for watching this. Let me know if you continue to like read the Women's Prize and what you thought of the shortlist. I think that's going to be the only prize that I read this year, but we will see. It has been nice to sort of explore some new titles, but I'm definitely just like getting back into my own reading now, so I'm kind of thankful that I am wrapping this up. But thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you in another one. Bye.